Next up, we have some of our friends at Total Performance Consulting, Amit Patel, who is the founder and CEO, as well as Zach Sergio, who is their head of sales, and he has a former relationship with us here at Kobiton as well. So I'm going to play in their video, and then we will come in with some live Q&A at the end.
All right, well, we are live. So welcome back, everybody, to the next session for the 2024 Mobile Testing and Experience Summit. So I just want to say a quick thank you to Kobiton for putting this on and for having us join and present today. So for quick introductions here, and we'll dive right in. Zach Sergio from Total Performance Consulting. So one of Kobiton's delivery and service partners, and joined with me here is our founder and CEO, Amit Patel. And Amit, I'll let you jump in and properly introduce yourself here.
Hey, thanks, Zach. Really excited. Thanks everyone for joining today. We're really excited to kind of share a little bit more about mobile app quality, and looking forward to just spending the next 30 minutes with you guys.
Good deal. Well, we can jump right into what we're going to cover. So as you would probably be able to guess, we're going to spend a lot of time, of course, talking mobile, but really focus on that in the context of performance engineering and automation. So probably some overlap with some of the other sessions that I had a chance to check out, but I think we got plenty of new stuff in here too. So in just a moment, I'm going to start off with a big loaded question to kind of serve as our North Star of what we're going to answer with the various keys to app quality. And so we'll spend 2-3 minutes on each one and have a little recap there at the end. And again, encourage everybody to make use of the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that and happy to answer questions along the way. So let's jump in. So again, for the big question, and knowing that we're focusing on mobile, which isn't easy in its own as it relates to development, testing, and delivery. Certainly mobile performance is a whole other beast aside from the functional discipline. So really what we're trying to provide some pointers and context for today is, how can you simultaneously make sure that, for the team that you have in place, that that you have the right strategy, the right skill set and expertise on your team, the right tooling and technology to make sure that everybody's properly equipped to keep up with the pace of development, so that for right now and in the future, you're able to meet the demands of the business and your user base as it relates to performance. And again, it's not like we're talking just web apps here, where you have an app delivered for something that, or an app that somebody's using on their workstation on reliable Wi-Fi. We're talking about all kinds of different operating systems and network environments. So, and we all have to figure out a way to do this without breaking the bank too. So we've got to be capital efficient with the way we invest our dollars into R&D and to our people and technology and into infrastructure. So with that, we can jump into key number one. And I think this, I'll tag you in just a second here, Amit, but I think really what we've seen, I know what you've seen, is a big change in just how the industry is looking at performance engineering. It's something that the little consultant shops like Gartner might not have mentioned a decade or so ago, but it's really starting to get more attention, and it's for good reason, especially in mobile too, right? For people that in the e-commerce world, the app abandonment rates, like, oh, it didn't load in 3 seconds, closed, or people are a little bit more impatient than we maybe used to be a couple decades ago. So but with that, I'm curious to get your perspective, maybe in the last 5-10 years, how have you seen the perception on performance engineering change overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you mentioned, just seeing this in Gartner is actually really exciting. We've been doing this for 20 plus years, performance, and it mainly was reactive, trying to educate folks on understanding why you need to do performance early on. And it's exciting to see that Gartner's talking about it. And not even that, the organizations that we're working with, they're actually looking to invest in performance. They're looking to invest in not only making sure they have the discipline in-house, but kind of cross-functional discipline for the different teams and applications that are working. So kind of seeing them doing that is really exciting, because we're kind of helping them through that journey around, hey, not only are you thinking about moving performance left, but you're also thinking about upskilling your current team, making sure you're doing it on a continuous basis. So like just having that conversation about performance across the SDLC is really exciting, from the business analysts to developers to even the production team, right? So those are things that we are seeing a shift in, which is great. On the flip side, we're still seeing, those organizations that are waiting till the last minute, waiting to really not even invest until they see an issue, or a customer might approach them and say, hey, where's your performance benchmarks reports? And then they kind of approach us and say, hey, we need to get this thing done before we go live with our customers. So, we're still seeing a little bit of that, but it's exciting to see that organizations are, starting to think about it more. And even Gartner mentioning is even, I think, phenomenal for the organization, in terms of the industry and moving everyone forward, because it's just going to help everyone in terms of application performance and making sure that the brand is not, his reputation is good and all that. So.
I don't think anybody in the world ever said, "Oh, I really enjoy using a slow application." So, hey, performance engineering has plenty of merit in the world, right? So, and to your point there, I think one of the biggest things I've seen, previously to joining Total Performance, but of course here, but in my previous stints in my career, is you'd have discussions around this, and again, like you mentioned, we had maybe it's an agile cycle. We had 2 or 3 days scheduled for testing, and oh, hey, performance in the last 3 or 4 hours, need you to squeeze this in right at the tail end. So obviously that can have a little bit of a ripple effect if something is found, and create a bit of a bottleneck too. So I think that the phrase you mentioned a second ago, continuous performance, that gets thrown out, of course, all the time. Continuous testing, continuous, insert buzzword here, right? But I think what's important, and I'm going to have you share some extra feedback on this for the audience, is making that a bit more practical. Like, what does that actually mean? So I think this will help illustrate it. But for just a few quick thoughts, and we'll tag you in here, is when we think about shifting left, first just shifting earlier in the test cycle, of course, but then really getting to that point where, as a new build comes down the pipeline, that it's configured in a way where there's at least small load and performance tests running against an API or a microservice, or that and for having engineers start to build out this service virtualization so they don't have to spend all this time on environment preparation, which is a whole beast in and of itself. But I think maybe having your thoughts on maybe shifting right or anywhere else on the SDLC for that matter.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. And kind of to add to that, it's really about the culture of performance, right? It's not about, hey, shifting left is not just about automating and putting in the DevOps process. It's also, are we talking about performance in analysis phase? Are we thinking about a performant architecture? Are we thinking about SLAs in terms of what we're looking for, right? Just kind of having those upfront conversations about, hey, we're building this functionality. Are we actually thinking about what the performance goals are, not just the quality goals or delivery date goals? So just thinking about that and kind of building that culture in itself, even just folks talking about it in the organization, I think is a huge shift in the left process, because not only now there's going to be top of mind at any time they're developing new software, new releases, things like that. So in terms of even like you mentioned around the APIs, like on the continuous side of things, yeah, we're not looking to automate the entire performance suite of tests, right? It could be, like you said, point API calls, or enabling the developers to kind of look at, hey, when you're developing a new API, here's some tests that we should run to understand performance early on. So it doesn't have to be like this whole grand thing about shifting left. But as you kind of mature, those are things that you'll continue to improve on in organization. That's what we've seen, right? Just kind of first starting, talking about it, and then moving left a little bit in terms of certain tests and kind of evolving from there, right? And then you kind of mentioned, right, can even looking at production, right? Looking at production monitoring, looking at what's working in production, not, and why not. And so kind of bringing that back into test, right? So kind of that whole cycle of that whole, again, I mentioned again, performance culture is what we're looking for, right? And kind of that just breeds across the organization, and just having that conversation just elevates the game in terms of building, mobile kind of performant applications, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of my favorite phrases is having proactive APM, or proactive application performance monitoring, making sure that you're catching things not in production when they're rearing their head, but in the QA or staging environment when they're a little less costly to the business to keep it at that. So
I kind of add to that, it's like we're kind of mentioning our organizations are like implementing APM across the different environments, QA, test. They have a UAT environment, and then production. So you're looking at, like you mentioned, the same kind of metrics across the board. So that kind of, again, helps you speak the same language with, say, the developers or the production support team. And you're again, looking at performance across the board, not just waiting to the end and looking at it only in production and not knowing how to troubleshoot that, say, back in QA or UAT or development environment. So.
Yeah. And I'm going to double click for a moment on what you just mentioned, the culture around it too, because I think that's just as important, if not more important, than what tools or processes you have in place. It's really the culture is the precursor to everything. So, it seems like organizations are really starting to empower the performance architects and their teams to really be that, that feedback loop from the technical teams through the business teams and back and forth. So, in catching up with Ram, one of our architects at our shop before this, couldn't help but snag this quote and use it for this, because it really did just connect the wires there. That you have to be, of all the roles in engineering, it's probably one of the most cross-functional roles that you could possibly be in, and also a very important one at that. So, because a business team might think, oh, I just need this checkout page to load in under a second, but that might mean for the technical teams, well, this API needs to respond in this time frame, and so on and so forth. So, having the translator and the mediator at times being in the middle can certainly go a long way. So, in the interest of time, we'll keep it pushing to key number 2 here. So again, we want to make this presentation, we'll have some technical subject matter, of course, but we'll want to make this approachable. And especially if your organization right now is maybe contemplating embracing performance testing, but doesn't really know where to start, that's exactly what we're going to discuss next. So there's all sorts of places that you can go with it. I think, just like organizations, I've seen this all the time where you're just starting out with functional automation to use it as a parallel. It's like, well, we want to automate 80% of our application and so on and so forth. It's like, okay, well, if you only pick 10% to start, like you got to start somewhere. What is the most critical areas of the application? So, might sound blindingly obvious, but sometimes it just takes an outside voice to just remind you that you're on the right track if that's what you're thinking. But what we really advise on that front is not just looking at the system overall, of course, making sure that the collective application is able to perform effectively when there's peak usage, but you want to make sure that at a transaction layer or transaction level, that certain processes are scaling as you would expect. So I keep picking on the checkout example, but an e-commerce app, just to use that, might reliably have tens of thousands of people on it during a peak shopping season, the time of the year, whether that's Black Friday, 4th of July, whatever it is, but that those APIs that power the checkout might get especially overloaded. So making sure that those are properly tested. So asking yourself what parts of our app are really going to contribute to the revenue of the organization, and making sure that everybody's got clear understanding of what sort of performance standards are acceptable. So and then I'm going to tag you in for the third block here, but just to briefly comment on number 2. I think this is where having a proper mobile device cloud solution really comes into play. So it's not just having a load testing solution like a K6, for example, but of course you can run that against simulators and emulators, but making sure that you're executing that against a device, a real device, so that and can triangulate. Okay, when this application is being tested on a real device and the APIs are under load, how do the UI elements scale with that? So we'll have a little example on that in just a moment. But any thoughts you want to add on the third block here, or anything else on 1 or 2 for that matter?
Yeah, no, I'll kind of add on here a little bit. So kind of adding on the build and fine tune your tech stack, right? In terms of having the mobile devices, the mobile cloud, having that network conditions in the right condition in terms of what your end users are going to be in is critical, especially when you're looking, as Zach mentioned, different network speeds, environments. You don't really know what you're going to be up against in terms of network speed and just reliability, right? So kind of having that in place is critical. Kind of adding to that tech stack is just making sure you have the right monitoring, the other load testing tools that are needed to drive the appropriate load. Kind of just understanding that holistic picture of what you need to put in place to make sure you're driving that realistic load and monitoring it and analyzing it to be able to provide that feedback and updates to development, to the network infrastructure team in terms of tuning, things like that, or cloud team, right? So those are, I would say, paramount, right? In terms of everything you've outlined here, we've outlined in terms of mission critical business processes, knowing what your SLAs are, to setting up that environment, and then like we touched on the other slide, iterating on performance, right? Where do we start? We got to execute these load tests or performance tests in terms of mobile performance, backend performance, and then looking at which APIs that we need to call on a more regular basis because, hey, they're in development and we need to make sure that they continue to perform. And that's kind of what we look at in terms of, can we run these on a more continuous basis that are, again, mission critical APIs, workflows that you need to be cognizant of that are going to be, in terms of new development or new features that could snag an issue later on, right? So kind of thinking of those things. But really, when you first start off, it's kind of what you define right here, right? In terms of mission critical, and then running those initially and making sure those are performing and kind of layering on as you iterate more in the SDLC process in terms of performance. So
yeah, appreciate adding that in there. And thought I had one more transition and skipped ahead too soon, but I think what we're gonna dive into next really picks up where you just left off, and given a little illustration to what does that tech stack actually look like in the real world. So I think this diagram, of course, a little oversimplified, but I think it can put things into perspective here. So let's say your organization's using a Jenkins, a Bitrise, an ADO pipelines, whatever it might be, but having as a post-build action, having a sequence of not just your functional tests, maybe that's running with a open source Appium scripts, maybe you're using a Catalan, something to that effect. And then having, of course, the load testing run alongside that. So whether that's a K6, Octoperf, NeoLoad, some of those types of solutions, but executing those against actual hosted real devices, and of course, the solutions like Kobiton, so that you're encompassing not just the automated and the functional testing, but you're able to, with a tech stack like this, understand what's our peak capacity, what are response times for certain areas of the application, how does load and certain interactions affect the device performance itself, which Kobiton's great at capturing those device level metrics in tandem with it. So, really, when you then shift right and look at this on the operation and monitoring side, you got everything covered from square one to out the door, from the continuous integration all the way to delivery. So really, when this is all fine-tuned, not only is it running the test cycle running more efficiently, having more coverage, minimizing more risk, it ultimately gives you that confidence in that go or no-go decision that sometimes can be a little stressful, and it really doesn't have to be when everything's all fine-tuned. And I'll generally leave it at that. But Amit, is there anything else? We want to make sure we stay on time here, but any quick thoughts you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think you kind of hit it on, but just I think better collaboration across the teams. Like you're kind of not having to talk to again. You're going to be looking at the load functional analytics. So hey, we need to set up this pipeline. So you're going to have to be really cross-functional and understanding what everyone's needs are and requirements and setup needs. So I think that better collaboration and kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, the culture piece of it, right? So just having that upfront thought about performance and just integrating it all, right? This is the more technical part of it, but it's that other kind of collaboration that I think is also key to this whole process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, especially when you think about having this execute against devices and solutions like Kobiton, that's again where that whole, various network conditions and operating systems come into play. So, if you have 10, 20, 30, however many devices hosted in there, then you're not just having requirement coverage, you have proper device coverage as well. So
that's critical. Absolutely.
That can be a whole beast too, right?
Absolutely. And that's very critical, actually. So
we got every angle. It's a three-dimensional problem. It seems like we solve for sometimes, but
hey, it's a lot of fun though.
Hey, it keeps you busy, right?
Absolutely. It's an art, right? So it's a lot of fun.
Art and a science, I would say. So, but I think that leads back into if that's the art, this is more of the science of it, having a really, like I think we've said a few times at this point, that systems mindset towards your architecture, because it's of course, as organizations go into the cloud, embracing microservices, there's sometimes a cascade effect where, oh, this one API that went down, well, that was reused in all these other areas, and oh shoot, that went down too. So but we wanted to have a little fun here with an analogy on trucks and or pickup trucks, I should say, and cloud architecture. So, and to set the stage, it's thinking, well, our architecture maybe hasn't been revisited or fine-tuned in a while, and maybe it's the equivalent of that trusty old pickup that you've had that's able to deliver a payload from point A to point Z, but it rips through gas at maybe like 2 gallons a mile kind of thing. Sometimes it seems like that, when in reality that sometimes it'll take an investment, of course, to streamline and level that architecture up, but the ultimate savings you get down the line from having something that is not over consuming resources or not putting you in a situation where you're paying for servers or VMs or whatever it might be that are just unused, and making sure that every single gallon of gas goes the proverbial extra mile or kilometer for those across the pond to be listening to this. So to get a bit more specific with this, I think and certainly going to tag you in for this, Amit, but when we're working with an organization, just to start there, it's not just a tooling, process, strategy, people conversation. Of course, that's important, but really we encourage organizations to continue or consider the broad picture, everything that makes up their app's own ecosystem. So when you think about yes, it takes time to go through and map some of these things out, but ultimately when organizations are able to identify some of those performance bottlenecks, and if they identify areas of the app that maybe are over consuming resources or this, that, the other. Because I think you've seen cases where sometimes it's just as simple as switching to a cloud provider or switching to a new cloud provider. But I know you've seen plenty of other cases yourself where, again, you just had those bottlenecks that were costing way more dollars than organizations originally thought. So I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of different issues like you run into if you're doing a lift and shift. Really, you don't know if you're are optimized for the cloud yet, unless you're looking to run performance tests and understanding where the capacity is and the bottlenecks are and how to auto scale. I mean, we've seen where we've actually worked with multiple clients where they've done that, and fast forward where after they've done the lift and shift, they're on very underutilized infrastructure because they were just over provisioning, not knowing what to do, and we ended up saving them, I don't even know, like millions of dollars, because it was just literally over provisioned because they didn't know how to actually size the data tier or the web tier, or it might be whatever the tiers are looking to optimize, or and really we're looking at that That's one angle, like you mentioned. The other is you could run into bottlenecks when you're auto-scaling and looking at the different metrics to auto-scale against. And if you're not actually catching that at the correct level and not spinning up the next instance, we've seen that cause issues too. And really it's just, and it could be just inefficiencies, right? Because it is a lot of different ways of being charged for cloud cost, right? So just knowing where you underutilize, overutilize, understanding your workload, and just making sure everything's optimized from storage and things like that. So very critical piece, especially if you're moving into the cloud for the first time and not knowing. And again, it could be going to the right cloud provider or just knowing the little things that we just talked about. And those are just exercises that are critical as you're moving new applications or old applications into the cloud. So
yeah, and it's I think I've worked with a few organizations, of course, won't mention, but it's like, oh, well, we moved to the cloud. Then it ended up being more expensive than we thought it would be. But then we realized, oh, we just needed to make some fine tuning. And here we are actually getting the value we were hoping to realize out of shifting from a on-premise architecture. So, but I think it just, again, shows not just the merit that performance can have on ensuring your app is going to support those mission critical processes, but just being a better steward of the resources as well. So it doesn't hurt to save a little bit along the way.
absolutely.
And I think that'll we got about 5 minutes left, I think. So we're pacing nicely here. So we'll conclude with key number 5 and a quick recap and get everybody on to the next session. So, but I think all of this is a bit of a moot point if we don't talk about the people in place that make all of this happen on the day-to-day basis. So I think, again, important to delineate performance engineers from performance architects. I think having both roles is especially valuable. Of course, you can't, it's definitely a 1-2 combo here, but really just underscoring that the engineering side has that role where it's more empowered to take on the tactical day-to-day, making sure that they're equipped with the right frameworks to script and execute tests. Of course, it helps when you have a strong framework that simplifies the maintenance part. So I know we hear all the time that we script in JMeter and spend more time maintaining the thing than we do actually using it. So, but in any event, just making sure that they have the day-to-day covered, and then I'll let you comment on the architecture side. But with this type of role, making sure they're enabled as that ambassador, if you will, the cross-functionally across the business, and having them be enabled to have those conversations with the operation and cloud teams, and maybe even at the design phase, making sure that, hey, if the business wants to make a change to the application, that's not going to cause this ripple effect later on. So. But I'll generally stop there. Anything in particular you want to add, or?
No, I think you covered it all. Performance architects are basically kind of bringing everyone together and trying to talk about performance of a holistic view, right? It's kind of an interesting role. Obviously, technically, you need to know what to do, but it's also kind of like a very people-oriented skill, because you'll be, as you mentioned, talking to very different folks in the organization and trying to make them understand each part of the process, because they're all important, and just kind of having everyone on the same page is critical. So.
Good deal. Well, that leads in, or I should say, begs the question of, hey, when it comes to talent acquisition, what are your general options? So, of course, always advise that you can go the in-house route. I think most organizations these days have their in-house recruiting team. So, that's certainly one way to go about it. And something that I think gets considered a lot, but just doesn't hurt to reaffirm, is that hey, you might already have the next best performance engineer already in your organization, and it just takes some upskilling and some training to take somebody that maybe had more of a development background even, or a functional automation background, and cross over more to the performance discipline. And I know we help organizations with both of those buckets there, but then the other one being extending your current team with either onshore or nearshore consultants. So I think we have about 2.5 minutes left. So maybe a brief thought, anything you want to add in terms of just helping organizations make sure they have the right expertise in-house to take on the day-to-day.
Yeah, no, I think you outlined all 3 options really well. Just kind of add to that is, we've helped organizations, as you mentioned, really the upskilling of their team. There's time and time again, they'll bring us in to kind of help set up the performance practice, kind of analyze everything, and then start to execute load tests or looking at mobile performance. And then at that point, start educating their team, training, upskilling their team. And over the course of time, they're able to take it on. And, we're working with customers right now that for the first couple of years we did the work, and now they're taking it on and just using us as a coach now. So.
Yep. Is that Georgia pollen sounds like it might be getting you there a little bit. So anyway, but I appreciate you adding on to that. So it's always a work in progress, and that's why they call it a QA practice, not perfection, right? So anyways, just to round us up here with a quick recap and a quick outline of potential next steps. So this generally encapsulates everything we've covered. So if nothing else, just making sure that we're shifting from that habit of late stage tests to, really leaning into the concept of shifting left and shifting right, making sure teams are, again, enabled and encouraged to work cross-functionally with various stakeholders in the business, and especially business stakeholders, and that performance engineering and load testing is not safe for that little last-minute test after all the functional automation's done and manual testing's done, that it's more on a continual basis. And of course, keep doing the large-scale periodic tests. Those are important too. And I think we went through plenty of ideas on how you might work with some of the existing solutions that you already have in your test stack, or tech stack, I should say, and maybe give you some ideas for other ones you might be able to explore. And then, as it relates to finding the budget and the funding of where to get the resources to invest in all this, you might already have those funds going out the door, and they just need to go from a cloud provider. Don't tell me I said that, and back into your business and reinvest it to streamline operations even further. So, just as a few final points, we would love to continue the conversation with everybody listening, and hope you enjoyed. So just to go through a few quick things that we're currently offering for Kobiton customers. There's a mobile and DevOps maturity assessment that helps you really understand the big picture of where you're at and gives you some actionable pointers on where you can go to further improve your practice. Of course, there's things we do solely focused on the performance engineering side, and we of course do help with that cloud cost and utilization audit. So we'll look forward to, or I hope you all have a great rest of the virtual summit, I should say, and we'll look forward to staying in touch. So Amit, I think we're at time, but I will let you give a little sign off there.
Thanks a lot, Zach, and thanks everyone for spending the time today with us. It was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you have any questions, just get in touch and we can help answer any questions you might have. So.
All right. Thank you, Zach. For those of you watching, if you have some questions, please throw them into the Q&A pane. TPC also has a booth in our booth area as well, where they've been hanging out in. So we have a few minutes here for some questions. And you kind of touched on this, Zach, when you were looking at the reframing the mindset kind of slide that you guys had around performance testing. And for folks watching this that kind of had a light bulb moment when you guys were talking about shift left, shift right, where do you recommend they get started? Like, is there a good place to go and kick things off, or is it that cultural thing you talked about? What would you recommend there?
Yeah, I think that's the real starting point, to the last part of your question there. But I think once there's general buy-in from, because it takes buy-in across not just executive leadership, frontline, middle management, but at a team level too. But I think once you're at that general point, then it becomes a matter of what's the squeakiest wheel. So for some organizations, that might be we could really fine-tune our monitoring approach. Maybe we should start there. I'd probably say getting production generally stabilized never hurts as a square one, if you will, but certainly doesn't hurt if that's already at a good spot. Maybe revisiting what are those earlier more shift left type approaches you can take. And yeah, I think the short answer is start with the squeakiest wheel.
Yeah, it's always easy to start with the biggest problem, and I think it's one of those funny things too. Like, you hear the word continuous testing, and everybody has their own definition for what that means. So, yes, a very good answer from your end of, hey, whatever is working at your organization and what needs to be fixed is where you need to start for sure.
Yeah, because the bottleneck might be a tooling issue, a process issue, some mix thereof. Maybe a system's not talking to another one, or I think. Both at Kobiton and at Total Performance, in customer conversations, we'd hear things like, well, yeah, the test automation cycle is completely fragmented from everything else after early development deliverables are done. So I think just getting everything in one, virtual highways never hurts to get that going.
It's the people that say they're agile, but it's really just an agile waterfall.
That's right.
Excellent. All right, so we have about a minute left here. Zach, I know you are familiar with the Kobiton platform itself as well, and you kind of touched on it a little bit there towards the end of what you can offer to Kobiton current customers. But is there anything you want to plug as far as prospects go, especially on the mobile side where they might need some additional help with their resources?
Yeah, so I think that for our practice here at Total Performance, it's really a two-parter. So the first side of it is what we're more or less discussing in today's presentation with just fine-tuning strategy, process, tooling, and so forth. But the other aspect of our business is more of the staff augmentation side. So we really only work for place roles in development, testing, automation engineering, delivery, DevOps. So really nothing outside of the engineering ecosystem. So that tends to be a follow-on when we're having a more in-depth scoping conversation. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we want to embrace automation. We don't have anybody to do it. Cool, we can help with that too.
Excellent. Awesome. Good to know. Well, we are coming up to time, so if there are any additional questions, please head over to the performance booth in the booth area, and